I feel so strongly that Broadway has a brand problem. It just seems like there is a huge opportunity to serve audiences because they're voracious. A video can get multi-million views, and our audiences, we're not filling, a 1,000 seat house. It is inaccessible. It's really, really expensive. We are not showing them enough of these shows. We are not bringing them in, and we're not advertising what the thing is, what Broadway is anymore.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Legroom. Today, I am here with Katharine Quinn, a business owner, a media mogul, someone who has the finger on the pulse of Broadway in a way I don't think anyone has in many years, especially for this generation, both of creators and of fans. I'm really excited to talk to you today. Thank you so much for making the time, Katharine.
Oh my gosh, Jake, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Do you want to tell the people a little bit about you wear many, many, many hats. You're welcome to touch on them all, but do you want to share a little about yourself?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. A theater person getting to talk about themselves. Yes, please. Yeah, so I run a company called And That's Showbiz. We are a Broadway marketing agency. We started with social only, and now we do influencers, partnerships, organic social, and we're moving into paid digital in this year as well.
Mhm.
This entails every single facet of social media, whether it is like, a scrappy iPhone video all the way to full blown media production with, gorgeous video and photography and all the things. And then we also do bespoke Broadway media. That's a new development. We just announced and launched 5 new series that we're airing on our YouTube channel by the same name, and that's Showbiz. And these are looking to fill sort of a content gap in the Broadway space of anywhere from short form 90-second woman on the street interviews all the way to like a 45-minute sit down with like
Mhm.
innovators in the Broadway space. So those are sort of like the big things. I do voiceovers. I have an Airbnb upstate. I'm just like serial entrepreneur. My degree is in directing. Occasionally, I still direct, but marketing is kind of the main thing right now.
That's amazing. So much to dive into. I can't wait. My degree's in directing too.
Oh my
I
gosh,
didn't
where?
Pace.
When? You're
I
younger than I am.
graduated 2016.
That's amazing. Did you
Yeah,
like Pace?
I did. I liked that it forced me into the city because otherwise, I think the city's too scary.
It is. It's
I don't. I
terrifying.
don't know how I ever would have made it here on my own. Where did you go?
SMU in Dallas.
Oh, cool. And you've been on YouTube for a while, right? Because I think that's how I found you originally, watching your vlogs as a theater
That makes me
person,
so happy because
right?
I feel like no one finds me through YouTube. YouTube, I will hit my 2-year anniversary next month.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
YouTube has been my favorite streaming platform of all time forever. So if that's the case, then yes, I definitely did find you and then have followed you since. And then one of the things that, because I was working in social media for Broadway over the past couple of years and following you, we have very similar ideologies, I believe, in terms of how we see the space and what's going on right now. And a quote that you had that I won't lie and I stole a couple times in meetings was, we have to meet people where they are. I think you have taken that was a couple years ago, and as evidenced of what you have launched and created, you have now built the entire next step of that. So when did you identify that something in the digital space with Broadway needed to be different?
I mean, probably much like you, like organically and a long time ago.
Hmm.
I love that you found me through YouTube because YouTube still feels like my new baby that like I care about a lot, but like I don't have tens of thousands of
Right.
subscribers. And so it still feels like this very, very, very niche thing. Whereas on TikTok, when I started TikTok, I had like 40,000 followers in the span of like 2 weeks.
Hmm.
And a lot of that was due to like the magical timing and all of that. And so that makes me really happy. And I've invested like no time in TikTok over the past, I don't know, 2, 3 years. YouTube's been the baby. But
Hmm.
at any rate, when did I identify that something needed to change? A decade ago, maybe like
Yeah.
so long ago. And then it just kept not evolving. But I think I started having really active conversations about it in 2021. When I was doing TikTok, actively when the world was shut down, when Broadway was still shut down. And there was just a ton of verbal ideation happening at that time of, what the industry might look like when we return, et cetera.
Hmm.
And I was dating a Broadway producer at the time, and we would have a lot of conversations back and forth, me as sort of like a plebe and like fan and audience member and creative, and
Hmm.
her as producer. And I would be like, well, why don't we do XYZ?
Right.
And there were all of these, obstacles or roadblocks or, whatever outside of it's just not the way it's done. But a lot of the time it is because it's the way it's always been done. And I just would find myself so incredibly frustrated. And then through a wild string of events, a year and a half ago, I had an opportunity to do social media for a pre-Broadway show and try out some of these things that I had been like, why aren't we doing this? And
Hmm.
so I sort of just started throwing spaghetti like aggressively against the wall, and it has worked out pretty well.
You have to be fearless in the way that you can throw spaghetti at the wall in a way that there are so many gatekeepers, and that's, I think, a lot of the reason things have been done the same. And I think this would be the same for any industry. I find that Broadway, and specifically in my experience, it is both a community that is deeply, deeply personal and small and emotional, but then also like multi-billion dollars.
It's an institution.
Yeah, very hard to get things done and changed because producers really are open to things, and they always want things to be the next big thing in every sense of the word. But then they also really want someone to buy a ticket for $150.
At least.
Yes.
Yeah, no, completely. And I can't imagine your experience having worked within an agency. I would imagine it's incredibly challenging because you have like multiple layers of, this is how the agency operates. And then this is what producers expect. And just like you said, oftentimes producers will be like, hey, do the amazing, miraculous, viral thing that you do. But then as soon as you start presenting ideas that are out of the box, they're like, well, we can't do that. And I'm like, well, do you want the thing that works, the cool new thing, or do you want to do what's familiar? Because those are unfortunately often not
Mm,
the same.
totally. And it's, I think, also about how businesses as a whole, and this probably isn't just for Broadway, also think about social, because I spent 90% of my time just doing administrative work, like very much like capturing content, creating fun things, like spending time on the accounts was absolutely the least amount of work I did. I was actually just in meetings and pitching a lot and working on content plans. So you then have to decide how you have to define as a business how you want to invest in social. And I think a lot of people are still thinking of it way too small. It's so big. It's like,
It's massive.
yeah, it's like people, some people in the industry didn't understand why, like, opening nights and like Tony nomination day was like one some of my least favorite days, because so much falls to the social creator. And I think in the future and in bigger corporations like Viacom and stuff, they have maybe a dozen people that do it, but like with us it's just one. So it's, yeah, it's a lot to juggle, on top of then trying to do everything you're doing and everything the fans want and everything the shows want, which is like creative, innovative content.
Yeah. And I mean, absolutely everyone has an agenda. The producers are often playing like a critics and Tony campaign game.
Mhm.
The cast all want their due.
Mhm.
The production team doesn't want to give too much away, but that's what sells the show. So it's like,
Yeah.
you really are pulled in a million directions, and it's as political a job as anything I've ever done, ever.
Yes.
It has to be. Otherwise, things would not get done.
I feel like you've made some really significant headway in your ability to create content that breaks the barrier of what would typically be the norm. Do you have a piece in mind that was like one of the first? Because I feel like once you have one, then it's easy. Not, I'm not trying to say any of it's easy, but I think it's easier to get buy-in from other people. Be like, I've done this before.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, we start I s- we when it was only me at Paper Mill Playhouse for Gatsby, um, I was making memes. I did a trend the first week of rehearsal with Jeremy and Eva about Barbie because it was like the summer of Barbie.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeremy Jordan was like, "No, why are we making content about Barbie?" But
Right.
like he was game to play and it ended up getting multi-million views.
Yeah.
And I had such an unconventional path. I was not an agency at that point. I was quickly developing a great relationship with the company. I was in the rehearsal room all the time.
Mm.
And at that moment, I didn't have the B-Way Gatsby handles. So I had to very quickly develop something that wasn't at its Katharine Quinn, because it would be weird if I had just been shilling for Gatsby for like months. So
Mm-hmm.
I built and that's Showbiz because I didn't have show handles yet. And I was like, well, this has to go somewhere. And so I
Yeah.
quickly was like, well, I guess we're launching a new business. And so I like pooled together a bunch of like Broadway friends to be like, hey, can you help me build teaser videos and launch videos? I launched it. And the next week was press week for Gatsby. And that's when, you know, I started properly posting on, I, through a very long string of political events, ended up getting the show handles. But I think because I was initially posting on and that's Showbiz, I had more leeway. It was my channel. And so it was like,
Sure.
yes, it's representative of the show, but it's not the show handle. And then there was already proof of concept by the time I actually did have show handles. And then there was another barrier between Paper Mill and Broadway, um, of, when it was Paper Mill, it was like literally just me.
Right.
Once we got to Broadway and like, the wonderful team at Paper Mill and one press team, once we moved to Broadway, I was suddenly in my first marketing meetings with like 40 people. And I was like, who are all these people?
Yeah.
What are all of their
I,
jobs? And none of them wanted me to be there,
yeah.
None
I
of them.
I have like every once in a blue moon, a producer will take a picture of a marketing agency meeting room, and I'll have people screenshot and send them to me and be like, what are all of these people doing? And it is common practice, at least in my experience, that every Broadway show, at least once a week, has a marketing meeting where the ad teams, design teams, the press agencies, the producers, the general managers, all of these people that do administrative work on the production, it's quite literally often around 40, meet and gather to talk about the show for an hour, and you go through a deck of events. And and it's crazy.
It is insane.
It is insane. So, did you ever have, when you were posting those memes, I guess you said it was to your account, so that can take it, but did you ever have like an email chain or like a producer or someone come up to you and be like, "Hey, like this is a like this is a great Gatsby."
No. And I think, well, yes and no. So the answer is basically no. I had such incredible support and buy-in from Kate and Nathan,
Mhm.
the other writers on Gatsby, via Jason. And Jason's the one who brought me in. And he was like, I mean, it was such a tremendously random, wonderful circumstance and unique. That's the word that I'm
Sure.
looking for. Um, so there was so much trust in the space within that part of the team, and there was not really additional oversight because it was a paper mill.
Mhm.
Once we got to Broadway, things changed a little, and the only time I think I've had to remove one thing for a political reason, NBD. It was something I didn't know about, wasn't privy to information, whatever.
Mhm.
And then the second thing was a piece of my own content, of because I speak pretty candidly about the industry, and I had
Yeah.
spoken candidly about something, and it cross pollinated with people that I was working with, and I got a call from a higher up saying, "Hey, you're right. Your piece of content is correct. Your take is correct, and also." I'm not saying take it down, but I'm just saying like exercise caution because like this is a thing.
Yeah, you spoke about that in a TikTok, or it might have been in one of your recent vlogs, about how you feel like you're entering this community where everyone knows each other and everything is so well greased. And I think one of the reasons there's not a zillion YouTube vloggers of Broadway fan, like it is so different than the West End, and how, and I think it's, I don't know. That's like a whole other conversation about how the West End had this reckoning with influencers and theater fans before the pandemic. Because
Mm,
I had been friends with someone who was one at the time, and I remember in like 2017, 2018, they went through this whole revolution of deciding to add hashtag gifted to their posts when they were getting invited to shows because there had become such an online community. The Broadway space only quite literally just recently, I would say this past summer, had that conversation. So this is like a 6 year difference. But you're entering into this world of this is this is who everyone is. There's actually very few people. I know I just said there were 40 people in a marketing room, but it's often similar 40 people
100%.
and own agendas, political things, everyone's there because they're so passionate about it all, but it can then make it feel very easy to feel like you're outside or you're othered, and like how do I break into that?
Oh, and there was they were not happy I was there, and it was clear.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was tough.
it is it is really tough, and I'm so proud of the way that you've persevered and you've been able to make it, because you've also now gone on to maybe happy ending, which is quite the story in terms of the, I don't want to call it the little show that could, but it is a
Oh,
small
100%.
musical by many standards, and it is going on a run that it opened in the fall. Great reviews is underselling it. Reviews that you could only
Yeah.
dream of getting when you open a original Broadway musical, and then trying to make it through the winter, which is a challenging time for any show.
Yeah, and it's also how on earth do you distill what that show is about in a sentence? And how do you make that marketable? Because the second I hear it's a robot musical, my brain turns off,
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's my favorite, in addition to The Great Gatsby on Broadway, my other Broadway client, it's my favorite thing on Broadway right now,
Yeah.
And so it's like, I want to sell it.
How do you feel then that making specific content online, whether it's for social, YouTube, however you want, content that goes out into the world, how do you feel that plays a hand in ticket sales?
Hmm.
It's the worst
Um,
question in the world.
no, it's just a big one. Um, okay, so the cut and dry answer is that every time we've had a viral trend on Gatsby, we can directly see a correlating spike in website traffic
Mhm.
and intent to purchase every single time. So even though the goal of organic social media is not ticket sales, and I cannot overstate that enough, it is awareness, it is brand building, it is community building, all of those
I'm
things.
so glad you're saying this.
And it's very, 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 very hard to communicate that to producers, particularly producers of a certain age. I've worked with producers who are incredibly well intentioned um, and also less well intentioned. No, I've worked with producers who are incredibly well intentioned and believe in the thing that I'm doing, but still ask me to run a piece of content again. And I'm like, this is
Yeah.
not a paid advertisement. That's not
Yeah.
how algorithms work. There is a fundamental, so much of what I'm doing is educating.
Hmm.
And now, thank God, Gatsby has been a use case so that I can skip a little bit of proving myself. So that there's an understanding, okay, she knows what she's doing, but
Hmm.
I'm still having to sort of explain why what I do works, explain what a meme is and why it is important sometimes to a brand, depending on what brand it is.
Yeah.
I think I've veered from your question.
No, I think you hit it right on the head with organic social being awareness media, which is not something that people want to accept up front. And I think when I look at it very like objectively, I can understand that. But having been in it for 5 6 years, it's like very obvious to me. And then how do you feel the integration of social also being the first line of defense for so many things? Like we're also like, when I think back, like some of the people I talked to the most was like the press team, because like so much of it was like, when are we announcing this on social? Like this has to, like, how, and community management, how does that factor in then to this like awareness and educational play?
Mm-hmm. Um, yeah, you broke my brain with that question. I think that it's just a giant puzzle. It has to be aligning with every other part of that 40-person team,
Hmm.
ensuring that the timing of every piece is hopefully a collab with a fabulous press outlet, but every big bit of breaking news is timed to the nth of a degree. So oftentimes that means you can't rely on a scheduling device because it'll post 10 minutes late.
Hmm.
And that means that Broadway.com and Playbill and Broadway World have already broken the news before your own personal channel has. And of course, you want to be the one who has that first big hit. Anyway, so you do that. And then in the midst of all of these milestones, you're providing content that both serves your existing fans and community,
Hmm.
and also playing into the pop culture zeitgeist in a way that you're breaking out of the Broadway silo and into a community beyond our little orbit, because there are so many fans beyond. And especially for a show, like, it's interesting because like I'm working on polar opposite entities right now. The Great
Right.
Gatsby is as touristy as it gets, and I love it.
Hmm.
And maybe Happy Ending is like our core audience on Gatsby is like out of towners who want that big capital B Broadway show. And maybe Happy Ending is the exact opposite. It's
Hmm.
like a 90-minute intimate transportive experience, and Manhattan intellectuals eat it up.
Yep.
And those are just like completely different animals, and so I'm learning so much navigating those worlds separately. And I also had such, I'm definitely veering from your original question, but I had
No,
such
go
a
on.
gift of time and foundation on Gatsby because I started with it out of town,
Hmm.
whereas maybe Happy Ending I started after opening night. And so just the difference in getting to build the foundation of that community versus not has been a fascinating experience as well. And I don't even remember your original question.
No, I honestly I don't either, but and that goes to show how great this conversation is going, because then I think that leads into another inquiry I have, which is how, when you're making a community and building a community, what is your goal?
Mm. Oh my God, I've literally never thought of that.
I think that shows that intuition and instinct is also a big part of the work we do.
I mean, I think that's been true of all of this the whole time. Like I've never had to, like I was saying, I've never had to explain the strategy of a meme, but now I've done it multiple times and I actually know how to talk to somebody who's used to traditional New York Times $40,000 print ads and explain to them the value of a meme in
Hmm.
words that make sense to them, or, a YouTube feature in words that make it's like a CBS Sunday morning special except it's contemporary, like
Hmm.
finding language that makes sense. What do I think of when I'm building a community? The thing that I think is interesting is a lot of the time, I guess I mean, I know that we are building communities, but it feels like I'm nurturing and fostering a thing that already exists.
Mm.
Um, it doesn't feel like I'm the genesis because like the show exists, it's going to have its initial fans kind of regardless. And then my job is to offer the fans, to not neglect the fans by only putting out things that look like advertisements and like serve people, oh, test, that serve people outside the orbit, but things that will feed them, make them want to return to the show, make them remember why they loved the show, help them to continue to be really vocal advocates for the show, but to like continue that experience. Like I think that somewhere that Broadway has so much room to grow is in terms of the experience of Broadway, both in
Hmm.
terms of what we experience when we enter the theater, but then a continued relationship afterwards. So much of our lives are digital, and there's such an opportunity to cultivate fandoms online. And with maybe Happy Ending, that part has been magic. It
Yeah.
has been so much fun. Um, so I think more in terms of like cultivating, nurturing, and building on the thing rather than engineering the genesis of it. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. I often explained it as a just big digital expansion of the brand as a whole.
Totally.
And you're in charge of developing and leading that direction, and then also I guess I was just going to repeat basically that exact same thing. So it's just like yeah, you're just responsible then for helping to curate how it grows beyond what it already is. Do you Is there something that you think fans take for granted? We're very pro fan on this show, and I feel like that's evident by anyone that knows you. And I am stating it now here for the record for me. So, is there anything that you think fans take for granted?
That's so interesting. I do feel that parts of the industry don't take social media for granted, and I feel like people, even within the production, can take social media for granted.
Hmm.
Recently, I have no complaints about fans taking social media for granted. It's my favorite part of the job. And generally, I find fans to be incredibly kind because they love the thing.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, do you have an experience?
I think, I guess the experience that I would say it was, I think people think that there were like a team of like 100 people. We all like everything was very planned and timed. And in my experience, things often was just like me taking a phone call in the lobby of an AMC while stepping out of a movie, trying to solve a problem with like four other people on a call. So it's like wanting to be able to, it's like we want to give you all of this. We want to show you all of this. We want to show you parts of the show that you don't ever see. We want to show you backstage, and we want you to talk to this actor. And this actor does not want to be on social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think I don't know that I'm like part of the problem, but we post a lot.
Hmm.
And I've left projects where I felt that I did not have the resources to do the thing that we do.
Mm.
And part of what we do is have relationships with a healthy relationship with the actors, with the creative team, so that we can amplify the show that we know how we can. And if we can't, then we're not going to be able to get you the results that you're looking for. And why are we there? Because you could just respectfully hire an ad agency who does perceive organic social as a nice to have instead of a need to have.
Hmm.
And they can put lovely graphics up. And I think that some agencies can obviously do well beyond that. But like, that's not our bread and butter.
Yeah.
Um, and to be fair, I think that you've probably worked on a lot more Broadway shows in marketing than I have. So you have a broader experience.
Yeah, I guess the what that's true. And what I was curious about you is as someone that has been able to deliver such great levels of variety of content that it's like sometimes it's like, do you give too much and then you're like, okay, like now reel it in and please buy a ticket.
We post twice a day, 6 days a week across 6 platforms. And we've been doing that now for a year and 2 months for Gatsby, and 3 months, a year and 3 months, which is bananas. It
Yeah.
is so much. And when we look into like, our software and we can see us versus any competitor, it's like they may have done 5 posts a week, a lot of the time, including stories. And for us, it'll be like 26, like
Hmm.
insane. Um, I hope it's sustainable. We are pretty fastidious about batching capture and all that stuff, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And I mean, I do think that that's something that, and that Showbiz, our company, can do that some of the bigger agencies cannot do because they have 80% market share. And we have 2 Broadway clients. And
Hmm.
and I have no interest in 30 clients. I have an interest in 4 to 6. And
Hmm.
like I want them to be my precious little babies. And I want to like exercise every single brand building opportunity. And that's it. And I just want to be
Yeah,
experts in those specific brands, which I think allows us greater capacity to do the insane amount of posting that we're doing.
totally. So then with your pivoting a little to the content series that you're dropping, which is really exciting, something you had mentioned is like we used to have the Broadway.com vlogs. We used to have so many things that were like the single like pillar like 15 years ago of like, oh, that's what's happening on Broadway because of like this one YouTube video we can watch. And now everyone has TikTok, all the shows have social, and but there still is a lack of unity in terms of what Broadway is. So what was your aim with launching the series and then deciding, okay, it'll be these 5 things and taking it from there?
I had the idea for this before I stumbled into marketing on Broadway. I've wanted to make this content forever,
Mm.
because I loved the Broadway.com vlogs and I loved
Mhm.
Susan Blackwell's show
Yep.
and, all of the things that we had, like you said, like 15 years ago. I feel so strongly that Broadway has a brand problem. I find the more that I get into the community, the more I experience sort of I think we can be very kind to each other, but there's so much scarcity mindset because it's a very, very, very hard business and everyone is very afraid and there's a lot on the line because these are $20 million, $30 million shows.
Mhm.
Um, and so there is just a lot of not infighting, but exclusivity within a community. And it's hindering the broader thing that is Broadway.
Mhm.
And that feels crazy to me. Like, 3 shows are at capacity and everyone else has seats to fill. Why are we being petty against one another? And I think what our generation, I think, can clearly see is like, we grew up on High School Musical and Glee, and like, BFA programs have had more applicants successively in the last, I don't know, 15 years than they had ever before.
Mhm.
I know they're there. The audiences are there and we're cultivating them and they've grown up on musical theater. Like musical theater, I've said this so many times, but musical theater is like in the zeitgeist and the Wicked movie just came and it was a $150 million film
Yeah.
that broke records and was like all we saw on social media, or at least all I saw on social media for like at least a month. So it just seems like there is a huge opportunity to serve audiences because they're voracious and they're consume with a video can get multi-million views and our audiences we're not filling a 1,000 seat house. And I'm like, why aren't we people? It is inaccessible. It's really, really expensive. We are not showing them enough of these shows. We are not bringing them in, and we're not advertising what the thing is, what Broadway is anymore.
Mhm.
And I think that there's like, I don't like old guard, new guard, but like I think that industry veterans, how about that? Think that being on Broadway is enough. And it isn't. It is
Mhm.
not enough. You have to build anticipation for your show before it even arrives. Anyway, I am interested in working on the brand of Broadway and offering an additional hub of Broadway content that is not show exclusive, that
Mm.
can highlight this incredible community and all of the amazing things going on. It's not a news outlet. I'm not selling tickets on the platform. It is media,
Mhm.
and that's it. So, does that answer the question?
It does. And I think that you hit the nail right on the head. I think it opens up a lot of cans, a lot of worms in terms of no one could have predicted the Wicked movie to have been as successful as it was, but I don't think anyone would have predicted Universal would have put the money behind it that they did. So then it becomes like a money thing. And it is quite expensive to do literally anything.
Yeah.
Literally
Yeah.
anything. It costs an enormous amount of money. So when you're then trying to, something I've been thinking a lot about recently is the resurgence of commercial off Broadway,
Mm.
which was a thing in the 70s and 80s and has since disappeared. Now it's coming back, and it seems like one of the only ways to make a show. And it's like, you put the production budget of a Broadway show, but then you only have to fill, you know, 200, 250 seats. But if everyone in those 200 and 250 seats is paying sometimes premiums of $450, then is it reverse scalable to Broadway? And if not, why aren't we? And if so, why are we doing it? That's like what I've been battling.
No, I think that's really interesting. I mean, to be clear or to be fair, the production company that is doing most of the successful commercial off Broadway runs is successfully, well, two of them, I suppose, is transferring those shows to Broadway and achieving the same thing. So Mike and Carly did Oh Mary, and
Mm-hmm.
Seaview is doing everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and transferring these, smaller budget shows oftentimes, so Seaview's whole thing currently appears to be giant celebrities
Mm-hmm.
in typically not new shows, sometimes new shows, and there's there are exceptions, um, and like Romeo and Juliet, Rachel Zegler and Kit Connor, um, making it cool,
Mm-hmm.
premium prices because of stars, and selling the place out. Now, I think it's interesting because O'Mary did something that really, like, no, it is such an anomaly
Such an anomaly.
because Cole was previously not like some mega, mega, mega star. And
Right.
thank God they are now, or to me,
Yes.
they are. Um, and that is so rare that like a what $350,000 off Broadway show can come in and break every lyceum, a theater where nobody wants to be, and break every record and go on to have a replay. Like it's absolutely incredible. But this shows that New World stages so far haven't quite done that yet,
Right.
like Teeth. And I'm like, okay, what's the disconnect there? I mean, there aren't the huge name stars, but like, is it something about pricing? Like, what, you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And O'Mary is something that I've racked my brain with for a while. And I think there is a point where things just become an event
Yeah.
where it transcends whether it's a play, whether it's a musical, stand up, whatever it is. And it's just like if you have money in New York,
It's the moment.
it's the thing to go see, which is why Lion King, Wicked, Hamilton are sticking around. And I think maybe O'Mary got into that. An experience that I have that I remember, and I hope it makes sense when I say it out loud, but like my friend won the Sweeney Todd lottery. So we went and saw the most recent revival of Sweeney Todd. And I remember kind of looking around and being like, this is not like an audience. I was like, what are all of these like young men and their girlfriends doing? And then in the line for the men's bathroom at intermission, it was just like all of these like finance bros dressed pretty nice. And they were kind of like talking like, are you bored yet? Like, it's fine. Like, yeah, Josh
Wild.
Groban's good. And it was basically, long story short, it was clear to me that they and their girlfriends go to see one Broadway show a year, or what, to like a big celebration. And they people in the culture know Sweeney Todd or they know Josh Groban, so they went. And I think about that all the time, where like sometimes you just have to get a thing to where it's the household name. And I think it's remarkable that O'Mary got that.
Yeah, I mean, it was like there's so much, but like I think the team around it did a phenomenal job. I think social media has done an absolutely
Mhm.
phenomenal job. I think that there's something really like sexy about a, you know, downtown or off Broadway show that's like the big hit that like transfers in.
Mhm.
But not everyone can do that. I mean, and I think there's something about the momentum and in taking advantage of the
Mhm.
momentum and then transferring. I think that's a really interesting thing. Thinking about even like city center revivals or Kennedy Center revivals moving
Mhm.
in. I think there's something about shortening timelines just because it takes so long for a Broadway show to get to Broadway.
Mhm.
And I think the great fortune of a great piece somewhere else that can quickly and in a lean way, because the thing that all those things have in common are off Broadway shows have considerably smaller budgets, and Kennedy Center and City Center Encore's revivals are concerts.
Right.
Transferring in on a lean budget, selling premium prices because it was a hit,
Mhm.
and making money. I hope there's also a path for like original musical theater to do the same, but
Mhm.
like it's tough.
Yeah, I completely agree, and it makes me sad that Teeth didn't
Me too.
catch on, but I also think Teeth took at
Big swing.
least a big swing, and what was it, an 8-month hiatus?
Yes.
Whereas like Into the Woods from City, that's a concert, but and Illinois didn't, at least to my knowledge, didn't recoup.
No.
I did work on it. Wonderful. But like that was at Chicago, then immediately to the Armory, and then I woke up one day
And you were on Broadway.
and they were like, "Hey, like this is happening," and I think they got it all done in like 6 or 7 days, which like may quite
Wild.
literally be a record for mounting a Broadway show. And it's that certainly helped. I think that show, unfortunately, because people just called it a dance show, but having that momentum did help make it more of like a moment and celebration. And then it ended up,
100%.
you know, getting one of the best musical nom slots, which was hard that year.
Yeah.
So it's eventizing, and I think then that's what you also do with working with influencers and partnerships. And is there anything you want to say about that, or your experience of why those are in the past couple of years become such a big part of a Broadway show's campaign?
Yeah, I think that influencers are incredible and powerful, and you have to be incredibly strategic and smart about the strategy around them. You can't just engage influencers.
Hmm.
Um, you cannot have an activation where it's just like they show up, or that is not. I suppose that you can, but I do not perceive that to be the smartest strategy.
Hmm.
I do believe in an event. I do believe in they, much like your core fans, can be some they are it's an opportunity for influencers to be your first advocates for your show, and you want to offer them some inside access. I know for me as a creator, I was a creator before I worked in marketing, and I was like, yeah, sure, some money would be great, but like, what do I want more? I want like inside access, and I want like a, a preview of something. I want something that's really special. I'm a theater nerd. We're making theater content because
Hmm.
we're obsessed with theater. um, and engaging influencers from beyond the both and the theater sphere. So I think it is very important, but I think that a lot of Broadway shows do not know how to leverage influencers properly.
Yeah. Do you think there's the higher level of influencers? Do you think they know what to do with a Broadway show to the point where they'll say yes to coming, and then if they do, it's like, how do they make it part of their brand?
Yeah. So, yes, I think that you can be really strategic and know, like, if it's a family influencer, if, you get the sense
Hmm.
that, like, if they've ever done anything with the Wicked movie, if,
Hmm.
it doesn't take a super long search to figure it out, or find some link to the show that they might find really engaging.
Hmm.
Um, we have an AAPI cast. So is it an AAPI date night experience for those
Hmm.
influencers? Or is it a Darren Chris fan, or I don't know,
Hmm.
some that's more of a theater influencer probably. Anyway, um as far as what kind of content they'll create, I don't believe in asking creators for a feed post without asking for money. The hope is always that they will, and providing them a special enough experience that they feel compelled to
Hmm.
post to the grid. um but just posting to the story is great. And then if there is a paid activation where I'm specifically working with an influencer, um, you're engaging people that to an extent. It's going to fit somewhere in their brand. And I like to help the ideation process of like, hey, what would a piece of content that is centered around dance look like? Or what would a piece of
Yeah.
content that is centered around XYZ look like? Um, yeah, so I think there's lots of creative avenues.
I love that. I think that that's the exact right frame of mind. As we wrap up something, and this kind of goes back to the start of the conversation, I think a lot of theater nerds and fellow creators that are hopefully listening would like to know is, how do you, like, can you walk us through you creating a post for a show from, let's say it's like a meme, or you want to capture something with a cast member, what your process would be for that from idea to posting?
Annoyingly, every single piece of content is different. So
Sure.
I now have a team, which is absolutely incredible, and they're wonderful. So a lot of the time, it is us brainstorming. I try to do as much content as in as little time as humanly possible to spare actors and preserve relationships.
Mhm.
Um, and so we have done all kinds of crazy things. We have had content parties. We have where it's like an offsite space and we're not dealing with some of the union regulations that we would face inside of a Broadway theater. And that has been really successful. And literally my team and I will make a giant spreadsheet of ideas and Q&A questions that we've asked fans for in advance, and meme ideas and trends that we might want them to do and how they would be applicable to the show that we're doing, and
Mhm.
then shooting as much content as humanly possible, and then aligning things where it might be timely,
Yeah.
and then things that are evergreen going further out. And do we need a video editor's hand on this, or is this something we can do just in our little internal team?
Yeah.
Or do we need a graphic designer who's involved with this? Okay, are there any approvals that are necessary for this? Do we need to send this to any producers? Do we need to send this to any managers? And then but like your basic Joe Schmo piece of content, if I wanted to go film something at the theater, I usually will communicate with the actors with whom I have developed a lovely relationship, be like, hey, is there an opportunity for us to swing by the theater, capture this within 10 minutes, sometime in the 90-minute window pre-show, because union-wise, that's what you got to do. How is 7 to 7:10, or how is 6:30 to 6:40? You can meet us in the Great Gatsby. We actually have a social media room, which is
Oh my
amazing
god.
because we have so many dressing rooms at the Broadway theater. So you can meet me in the social media room, or we can do this in so and so's dressing room. It will take 10 minutes or less. And usually we'll have to do a social memo. The social memo will go out to, our distro list of like literally 40 to 50 entities at the theater.
Mhm.
We will show up day of. Sometimes it's just me. Sometimes it's me and one other person or a photographer or whatever it is. We will gather in the space. We will crank out the content as quickly as we can. Sometimes brilliant ideas happen in the moment when it's like, oh my gosh, let's also try this and let's try this. I'm really respectful of people's time. We get out, then editing, putting it in the calendar, scheduling it out to the 6 platforms, and then it goes live. So anytime somebody is like, why aren't you just posting about blank? I'm like, you have no idea. Or even a cast member being like, why haven't you posted that video of me from the weekend? I'm like, we have 2 months of content that we have scheduled fastidiously, and my algorithm is telling me, my like dynamic scheduler is telling me that the ideal time to post that video of you is at 2:41 this afternoon, and you are emailing me at 11 a.m. this morning. I am on it. I need you to trust me to do my work and move forward.
Thank you for sharing all of that process. I think that is something very obvious to you and I specifically, but will be very beneficial and interesting to people that don't know. And you have put the work in place where you have made the relationships with actors. I think a lot of time
Critical,
actors, they just want to show up and do their job, which does not involve meeting in the social
which
media
also
room.
makes sense because that job is exhausting.
Yes. So then you're like balancing all of these things, but I think your ability to like make that relationship, help communicate why it's so essential, and I think you're especially working on 2 shows where it is so essential, and the casts are young and understanding of
100%.
everything. So I think that process is great to know and understand, so that people can help get a better idea of how the world works.
Totally. You have asked such brilliant questions, and I'm so happy that we like finally got to chat.
Me as well. This has
It's
been
been a
such a
treat.
joy. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you're doing for the brand of Broadway. Tell the people where they can find you.
Yeah, I invite you to follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at It's Katharine Quinn. And then you can follow all things And That's Showbiz at And That's Showbiz. Our long form series are on YouTube, and our short form series are on Instagram and TikTok.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Catherine. It's been
Thank you,
such a
Jake.
joy.